Welcome to Creator's Edge Studio. I'm Tom Marcoux.
And I'm John Colton.
Here at Creator's Edge Studio, we talk about pop culture and things that are fun. And we have the philosophy, teach me something I can use. In this episode, we're going to talk about the feature film, The Suicide Squad. James Gunn, Joker, Marvel Cinematic Universe, DC Cinematic Universe, Tom Hanks, Harley Quinn, Han Solo, world building, universe building, and what you can do to get unstuck and to overcome writer's block. John, you saw The Suicide Squad. What's your take on that?
I would give it an A.
Okay.
I recommend. It is the best movie that DC has made without Christopher Nolan being the director.
Okay, that's very specific. We're talking about universe building. We're talking about world building. What did The Suicide Squad get right?
The first big thing that they got right was that the premise was true to the comic book. Because with the 2016 movie, it was kind of built around this idea that you had to form this group of villains in the case that Superman ever went rogue or became evil or was under mind control of somebody else. The government would need a group to take out Superman.
Not these guys.
You have a problem when the foundational idea behind your movie doesn't make any sense at all. Like Harley Quinn, interesting character, but I don't see how she's going to stop Superman. Not with the baseball bat.
Right, with his laser vision. Sure.
Right, impenetrability and super strength. But what this movie does...
You're talking about The Suicide Squad of 2021, the feature film directed by James Gunn. I know you really appreciate James Gunn.
Yeah, what this movie does is it goes back to the idea in the comic book that the government wants to use the Suicide Squad for things that the government doesn't necessarily want to have its fingerprints on.
Mm-hmm.
If everything goes wrong and everybody dies, they are just a bunch of escaped criminals and the government can deny any involvement. And also, one of the things that it gets back to from the 80s comic book by John Ostrander is they take a bunch of C-list characters and kind of get into their backstory a little bit, make them interesting, make you care about them, and then they die.
Okay.
Which was kind of the formula in the comic book, and it really heightened the suspense because you knew that nobody was safe.
Right.
And any one of these characters could go at any time. It's kind of similar to Game of Thrones in that way.
Got it.
And having that suspense and seeing these C-listers do good is really kind of what made it fun and made it work. It's really just about just being true to the source material and being a fan.
The detail that we're talking about here is about world building and universe building. When you're building a universe or you're doing world building, it's always about asking questions. What do you think is an important question to ask oneself if you're creating a universe like a Marvel Cinematic Universe or a DC Cinematic Universe? What is an important question to ask when you're making a universe?
It's 1,000 questions.
Right.
You have to figure out everything about that universe that makes it real. I think with the DC movie universe, one of the problems that they've run into is there's a lot of inconsistency. And there's inconsistent rules, inconsistent timelines. And at some point, DC said, well, we're just going to call it the DC multiverse.
Okay.
And some of these movies are connected and some of them are not. And nobody's really even sure what the latest movie, The Suicide Squad, is compared to the first one, Suicide Squad, because it's not exactly a reboot. It's not exactly a sequel. It's not exactly an alternate universe, but it kind of is. And nobody's really sure what to make of it. The fans are not sure what is canon, and the studio is not sure what is canon.
So in terms of the questions, and you mentioned it's 1,000 questions to get your universe right. One thing that really came up for us talking about characters is a phrase that you said, mystery is part of the cool. There are certain characters like Han Solo. He was cool because you knew that he would do what's necessary to survive. He was dangerous. That makes him powerful. And then years later, George Lucas gets in there and he says, let's use some terrible digital effects and make it look like that Han shot second, confronted by Greedo. Han Solo suddenly loses his cool. He loses part of who he is as a character, as a survivor, as someone who's going to do the necessary thing, no matter what's going on.
In the first movie, Han Solo is the anti-hero.
Mm-hmm.
He's not the white knight in shining armor who has the code of good that he lives by.
Right.
But he kind of became that over the
Yes.
course of the 3 movies. You know, there was kind of an arc to his character.
Right.
Where
Right.
he became self-sacrificing and became somebody who cared about his friends and would do anything for them.
Right. It wouldn't have been such a great, wonderful ending to, spoiler alert, to Star Wars A New Hope, the film that's been around for decades. It would not have been so great that he showed up to protect Luke at the end of the film. We thought he left. We thought he was so unreliable that he wasn't going to be there to back up Luke, but he does back him up. So that is a very important part of the structure of that first film, 1977 Star
Yeah,
Wars A New
absolutely.
Hope.
The only things that we knew about him at that time was he was a smuggler and he had no love for the Empire.
Right.
That's vague enough. It's mysterious enough that it makes him a compelling, interesting character.
Right.
You know, it's somebody who you want to know more about.
You have to put the mystery in. Mystery is part of the cool.
The Joker in the Dark Knight movies.
Yes.
Heath Ledger has these lines about, do you want to know where I got these scars?
Right.
And every answer is different. And so I remember watching that for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And every time he starts to tell a story, you're just hooked. Because you're like, is this the one? Is this where he tells the truth about where he got those scars? Which of these stories is true? And then you start to realize, oh, maybe none of these are true.
Right. He is even more evil, more demented, because he is playing with everybody and he's enjoying manipulating everybody.
And one of the things that I think a mysterious character does is it makes your audience interact with the story more.
Right.
Because our brains can't help but try to fill in the details.
Right. Exactly. Just about every good story has some elements of mystery to it. Many of the great characters have elements of mystery. In fact, it takes us to what I've called the Tom Hanks solution, which is that Tom Hanks, according to Steven Spielberg, did something that he has not seen other actors do. He cut his own lines out of the film Saving Private Ryan, and that creates a mystery about his character, Captain Miller, through the whole film, Saving Private Ryan, until near the end, we finally find out that his actual civilian life is so different than his being a leader of soldiers. Cutting lines is something that I've actually learned to do too, to create mystery or to make a character more important. Currently, I'm writing the 4th novel in the Gently Storm series, and you and I had a conversation about this. I had written a first draft that had a number of lines for Dracula to say, and then I called you up and I said, hey, check this out. I've got a bunch of lines. Are these few lines for Dracula iconic enough yet? And so we had a conversation about that. It's really powerful. A line is interesting when people can have what I call coffee shop talk. After you see the film, you go into a coffee shop and you say, now, what did that line really mean? Well, to me, it means this. And the other person says, well, I also feel that it could mean this other thing. You can't have coffee shop talk if you don't have some mystery. So in this episode, I'm providing techniques to help you get unstuck when you're writing, techniques to help you overcome writer's block. The first technique that I use all the time and my clients use also is if you're writing and you know the first line of dialogue and you know the last line of dialogue and you don't know how to get to the last line of dialogue, you just type in underscore underscore M-O-R-E, more, underscore underscore. You know that something's missing, but you capture the great first line of the dialogue, the great last line of the dialogue. Another thing is you just start writing, no matter how you feel. All professional writers, they just start writing and you know it's garbage. Probably the first 5 or 10 minutes, you don't like anything you're writing. So you just put right next to what you wrote, this paragraph, you put bracket, revise, bracket. So you're acknowledging to yourself, I don't like this, it's not good enough, but you are writing. There's a difference between doing research and writing. And then the next thing ties into what we talked about earlier in this episode is you ask yourself questions. So you type a bracket and then you ask yourself a question like, geez, this is getting boring. I need something to happen here. Let's see. The old solution with the old detective stories was have somebody come in with a gun or blow up a wall and then someone comes in and says, you got to get out of here. Now, you can ask yourself, so am I going to blow up a wall? Is someone going to come in with a gun? You just ask yourself these questions and then you answer those questions and then you close the bracket. So you have an open bracket and a closed bracket so you can keep asking yourself questions. And these are ways to get unstuck. You could use more, revise, and you can also ask a bunch of questions and answer those questions between brackets. And that's how you'll be writing and moving forward and discovering things. John, is there something you would like to add as we come to a close?
Well, I just think you're right on about the Dracula dialogue and the idea that less is more.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was something that worked very effectively. Again, going back to the first Star Wars movie, for another character in a black cape, Darth Vader did not speak very much. He didn't have extensive monologues.
Right.
But when he did speak, he had your full and undivided attention.
Right. Well, this has been a lot of really powerful stuff. Thank you, John.
Yeah, thank you, Tom.
Wow. Someone made it all the way to the end. Hey, you might as well hit the subscribe button while you're here.
Please. Yeah, cool.